afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I am Councillor Paul Wynne, Chairman of the committee. Some housekeeping notes. We are not expecting a fire drill today. In the event of an alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to inform you that this is a meeting is held live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you please to ensure that mobile phones are switched off and ensure your volume on your laptop is muted. To ensure the members of the committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you that I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. Members should ensure that they are present throughout the meeting, as you cannot vote on any item if you've not heard all of the debate. Can members and officers introduce themselves each time before they speak, so those listening know who is speaking? Just to make members aware, the committee members have changed since the publication of the agenda. Councillor Pam Mosley joins the committee, with Councillor Caroline Bagnall as a substitute member. I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. So Alex, can I start with you, please?
Councillor Wagner, Berybrook Division.
Councillor Joyce Barrow, St Oswald Division.
Councillor Roy Oldcroft, Market Rate and Eastern Rural.
Councillor Jeff Elner, Ellesmere Urban.
Councillor Julia Evans, Radbrook, Shrewsbury.
Councillor Andy Boddington, Ludlow North.
Councillor Pam Mosley, Mugmore in Shrewsbury.
Councillor Roger Evans, Longdon Division.
Councillor Vincent Lanmanic.
Cheers, Mike.
Mike Davis, Consultant Planner.
Charlotte Morrison, Planning and Development Services Manager.
Idris Iqbal, Solicitor.
Christian Hawley, Barrister.
Miranda Garrard, Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Sarah Robinson, Area Planning Officer.
And Ollie Thomas, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you very much. Okay. Item 2, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of November. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Joyce. Seconder? Seconder?
I wasn't there.
Oh, sorry. Seconder? Jeff? Anybody? Thank you. No, you weren't there, actually. That's all right. Jeff, would you like to second? Yes. Thank you. Right. Public questions, none received. Is there any disclosable and pecuniary interests?
Items 6 and 7, they're on my patch, so I won't take part in the discussion and I will move to the back of the room.
Thank you, Joyce. Anybody else?
Item 8 is in mine.
Sorry?
So item 8 is in my ward, so I'll also move to the back for that.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Right, onwards, forwards. Planning applications. Right, okay. Let's go. Right, item 5, Springfields, Roughton, Shrewsbury, Shrewsbury. Who's the... Oh, yeah. So, yes, thank you, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Robinson. I'm the Planning Officer dealing with this application. The application was called in by the local member who had raised material planning reasons and therefore requires committee determination. The application for the erection of a replacement dwelling. Here's a photograph of the existing bungalow from the access track to the south. And here's a photograph of the existing dwelling from the west. And here's an existing block plan indicating the site and its surroundings. And here is the proposed block plan for the proposed development. Planning policy does allow for replacement dwellings. However, replacement dwellings should respect the bulk, scale, height and external appearance of the original dwelling. This application seeks an increase internal floor area of 97%. The local planning authority do not support replacement dwellings at a 97% increase of the internal floor area. Planning policy, specifically the adopted type and affordability of housing supplementary planning documents, seeks to maintain and provide an appropriate stock of smaller, lower cost market dwellings. The supplementary planning document also requires replacement dwellings to be sympathetic to the size, mass, character and appearance of the original dwelling. And officers do not consider that the development in this instance demonstrates that. On the plan you can see the red hatched area, which is the existing bungalow, and then there are purple hatched areas showing what can be developed under permitted development rights. And then we can see the overlay then of the footprint of the proposed.
Could you just take the microphone towards you a bit, please, because the drum's outside.
Sorry. Is that better?
That's better, thank you.
Brilliant. There you go. Here's then a plan demonstrating slightly clearer then the existing bungalow, and then the purple hatched areas demonstrating what can be achieved under permitted development rights. This is the the proposed ground floor for the proposed replacement dwelling. And here's the proposed first floor element of the proposed replacement dwelling. Here are the proposed elevational plans. And again, the remainder of the proposed elevations. Again, just to recap, photographs of the existing bungalow. And again. And then this is an agricultural building which is on the edge of the development site. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal as the proposed development is materially higher and significantly larger than the existing dwelling and is not sympathetic to the size, mass, character and appearance of the existing structure. In addition, the proposed new dwelling will not meet the policy objective of regulating the size of replacement properties in order to limit the tendency towards provision of larger dwellings in the upper countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have a couple of speakers on this. We have Mike Lloyd, the agent. Would you like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes when you start speaking, Mike, okay? There's a clock over there, which will, if you can see that, okay?
Right. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
No
thank
problem.
you, members. As committee will recollect from a meeting last year, officer and committee concerns over the previous proposal for this replacement dwelling related to its scale and design, therefore its impact upon the supply of smaller and affordable dwellings and upon the character and appearance of the area, as Sarah's pointed out. In response, the applicants have revised the scheme to reduce the overall scale of development proposed on site by approximately 70 metres squared, and proposed an overall floor area that's the same as the existing dwelling plus its permitted development rights. The proposed dwelling size has been restricted to the same as the existing dwelling plus PD rights because previous council decisions and appeal decisions have accepted replacement dwellings up to the size of the existing dwelling plus PD rights, as they do not materially affect the supply of smaller affordable dwellings. An example of such a decision was provided within the applicant's submission. The committee report also recognises in paragraph 624 that planning policy enables the approval of larger dwellings, but where a larger dwelling is approved, PD rights for the new dwelling will be removed, and the applicants are happy to accept such a condition. With regard to design, the officer report concludes the proposal is not sympathetic to the size, mass, character and appearance of the original. However, the report also states in 6.2.11 that the existing bungalow is out of character with the area, and in paragraph 6.3.3 that the proposed dwelling will not result in any unacceptable visual impact. We agree that the existing bungalow is out of character for the area, and the applicants have provided a a contemporary design solution with a two-storey element to reflect surrounding dwellings, none of which are bungalows. They've proposed Cardiston stone in its construction, a traditional building material in the area. And they've reorientated the dwelling to lie directly over the footprint of the existing dwelling to accord with the Council's supplementary design guidance. We believe it's evident that the proposal will result in a reinforcement and enhancement of the area's character and appearance. In conclusion, the proposal aligns with the Council's policy framework and with previous Council and Inspectorate decisions on replacement dwellings in the county. The fallback position for the applicants is to extend the bungalow to the same size as the proposed dwelling under PD rights. That doesn't provide any of the benefits that this new dwelling provides, such as the positive impact it makes on the character and appearance of the local area, and also the provision of a dwelling designed specifically to meet the needs of local people, enabling them to continue living and working in their local community, and significantly a community that expressed strong support for the proposal.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The local member would like to speak, so Ed Potter, Councillor Ed Potter, you'd like to come forward, please. As the local member, you have 5 minutes to speak, Ed, okay?
Thank you. Thank you, committee. Members of the committee who were here when this application came before you will remember how I outlined the importance of, for our local communities in rural areas, to enable multi-generational families who are working in agriculture particularly, and running successful businesses in the hospitality area and a local vineyard to live and work within the local community. And this application enables them to do that whilst utilising a plot that is already existed and developed. I don't consider this to be an overdevelopment within the setting of Wrighton itself. As you've heard from the previous speaker, there is a significant mix of developments, a mix of properties in this immediate location. All of them are two-storey homes. This is an exception, being a single-storey bungalow that is of a dated and in a condition that isn't conducive with modern standards and would take a significant amount of work to bring up to those standards. As outlined before, the application has been reduced by approximately 70 square metres in size, to which I think is the key point here, that using the same footprint as what could be allowed under permitted development rights. In terms of size and scale, there is no adverse impact within the setting. As you come over Windmill Bank by the very good pub that is the Windmill, you will see that the bungalow sits within its location, and it is surrounded in the background by two-storey dwellings of various ages and styles. Particularly, there's a lot of support locally for this, largely for the quality of the design. A modern design, which again, we are not, the properties in this area have been built over hundreds of years up until relatively recently in the past 2 decades. So there is a very varied mix of design styles. But the use of local stone particularly is welcomed, and this is something that has garnered a lot of support locally and is, we think, essential to enabling people to live and work in rural communities which are under significant pressure, who add a great deal of value to our area. And there is a feeling that there isn't a detrimental impact by size or scale here, and would actually enhance the community, would enhance the visual impact, particularly with the reorientation of the building as you come along the 458 past the Windmill Inn and continue forward into the settlements of Wattlesborough and through to Halfway House. Therefore, I would, taking into consideration the amendments the applicant has made to reduce the overall footprint of the property, and with the fact that it lies within the same size as the permitted development rights, I would ask that the committee would look favourably on this and support this application that would greatly benefit the community which I represent, support a multi-generational farming family that provides employment locally, and we want them to continue to flourish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Charlotte, would you like to come back on any of the speakers then before I open to the floor? Or Abbey? No, you're fine. That's fine, Sarah. Thank you very much. Right, open to the floor. Thank you, Alex.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with what Councillor Potter said. I mean, it seems like, compared to the first application, they made an effort to get it more in line with the standards we're looking for. And I think, obviously, the housing need in that area and in rural communities is for this sort of housing. So I'd be more than happy to, unless the committee have more comments to make, propose that we go with it.
Thank you. Joyce?
I think Councillor Potter made a very compelling speech, and I tend to agree with him, so I will be backing this being done.
Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. Hearing about the development rights being used for this and not being available for the future, I would be supporting this, and if Joyce wasn't seconding it, I would. I'm not sure. Yeah, I would second that the committee agree this proposal.
Julia, you wanted to speak? Did I see you sort of put your hand up?
Sorry, I was just going to say, having lived in this area, I know farming families who've had to move away because they couldn't build within, and I know how many houses have recently been built that are of two-storey, and I know that this bungalow is out of character for this area, and you can't get more local than Cardiston Stone to that area. That's quite significant, and I think our local member spoke very well as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Yes, so I just wanted to outline that although the scheme has been reduced from the scheme that was previously refused at committee, all that has been removed is the garage that was going to form part of that dwelling. And we still have the concern of the scale and massing of this proposed development in relation to what's there existing. We do just have a relatively modest bungalow, which will be replaced with a part single-storey and part two-storey replacement dwelling that will be quite larger in terms of scale and massing compared to what is there existing.
Thank you. Ollie?
Yeah, thank you, Ollie Thomas. And just a point of clarification as well, our SPD, our adopted SPD is clear in that when we're considering replacement dwellings in the countryside, they need to be on the same or similar footprint of the same scale. And here we can clearly see that the replacement dwelling doesn't sit on the same footprint and is 97% larger, so almost doubling in size.
Thank you. I have a proposer and a seconder. Any other comments? Okay, we shall. So, yeah. Yes, yeah. Yeah, yeah, please, yeah.
If you want to approve this, what we could do with is the recommendation to approve subject to delegation to officers to write out conditions. I don't think, unless you've got any particular conditions, one of which will be removal of PD rights as per what's in the SPD. So that that will be what needs to be the recommendation, would be approved subject to delegation to officers for conditions.
All right with that, Roger? Yeah. Joyce? Yeah. Right, so... So we'll have recorded vote on this, please. Not the right word, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair. We have a proposal to grant planning permission, which has been seconded, and members are of the opinion that whilst it is contrary to development plan, there are material considerations to indicate the grant of planning permission. Please can you confirm whether you're for or against the proposal? Roy Aldcroft?
For.
Andy Boddington?
4.
Joyce Barrow. 4. Jeff Alner.
4.
Julie Evans.
4.
Roger Evans.
4.
Pam Mosley.
4.
Alex Wagner. 4. Vince Hunt.
Against.
Paul Wynne.
Against.
So that's 8 for, 2 against.
That's gone through. There you go. So we'll move on to the next application, which is item 6 and 7. And Ollie, I'm going to move over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ollie Thomas, Principal Planning Officer. You'll note in your agenda packs that item 6 and 7 are to do with the same site, so I intend on presenting them together, but at the end we'll need 2 separate resolutions being made. The application site is the Oswestry Innovation Park to the east of Oswestry. It received planning permission through EIA back in 2021, and they've done a subsequent reserve matters to deal with some of the internal road arrangements, but following some further design review and reaching out to potential end operators, they've realised that the approved access spurs are proven, well, I think it's one of those situations where had they not been there, it would have been a bit more easier to market the site and attract some local, regional or national operators. So the applications in front of us today are non-material amendments to those previous permissions to remove the access spurs. It's on this screen, sorry. So this is the first application, so item 6, site location plan. This application was a hybrid, so the full detail was just the internal road, which is outlined in red. The remainder of the blue land was subject to outline consent, and that was to grant up to 43,500 square metres of employment space and 2,800 square metres of hotel use as part of the wider mixed-use allocation. Then the second reserve matters application shows the roads 2, the red line to the north, and then road 3, the red line to the south. Here is the latest site master plan. As you can see, a mix of different uses, mix of building scales. Again, approved bottom left, amended top right. In addition to removing access spurs from this road 3, they're also removing the substation. Sorry, I've gone too far. Oh, how do I go back? Yeah, so as I say, we're recommending them as for approval based on them being non-material. We've consulted with our local highways authority, who have also agreed that the changes in removing the access spurs will have no impact on the wider network, because the requirements of the original permissions are that in order for this site to be operational, the individual plots have to come forward for their reserve matters anyway. So even with the roads constructed, it doesn't necessarily mean that the site will become operational, because there's still further applications that are needed to confirm the detail and scale and layouts.
Finally, as a reminder, we will need two decisions, one on item 6, one on item 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. I'll come to the floor. I think it's quite straightforward, but yes, Vince.
Well, we're taking them in two blocks, so I was just going to move the officer recommendation for item 6.
We're taking them both. Yeah. Yeah, I'll second that. Any other comments?
I was going to second it. I can't see any problem whatsoever. There's no implication or problems to traffic, etc. So there's no reason to say no, as far as I'm concerned at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think we have a show of hands. If everybody's happy, all in favour? There you go. Thank you very much. Joyce, you'd like to rejoin, please?
No, no. Do item 7.
You've still got the item 7. Go on. Oh, okay.
Well,
right, so
Ollie ran through it in his preamble. He took together, so they had separate votes.
Okay, so
I'm also going to propose that we go with the officer recommendation for item 7.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Roy. No other comments? All those in favour, please show. Unanimous? Okay. Thank you very much. Joyce to get back. Okay, move on to item 8, Welsh Pool Road, Bicton Heath. Mike is presenting this. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. This is the application for the North West Relief Road. Members will recall it's previously been before them on 2 occasions, October 2023, when the application was considered. Members moved to recommend approval subject to conditions being agreed. Those conditions then came before members in February 2024, where those conditions were agreed. As part of this application, there are certain amendments to those conditions previously agreed. So I will touch on those later, but the main purpose of this application coming back to committee, it relates to the increase in carbon emissions, which have now been subject to a further carbon review, which was required via the Department of Transport as part of the funding package. So the local authority, the applicant was given a new set of data basically to produce these carbon calculations, and on the back of that, when the local planning authority saw that, we felt that there was a change there which needed to be reported to planning committee. I think in particular, whilst the numbers look quite big, actually in reality they don't really make a great deal of difference. I think where the difference is in terms of how they will be dealt with via condition 41, and also the impact in terms of the council's declared climate emergency. So if we think about in terms of the emissions themselves, there's one receptor here, and that receptor is the globe, if you like. So in terms of on the world stage, it doesn't make a great deal of difference. Clearly, on a localised basis, in terms of the council's climate change commitment, it makes a big difference from our perspective, and also I think it makes a difference in terms of how that condition 41 is framed as well. So moving on from there, I think it's the question, the real issues from our perspective are the impact on climate change, the declaration the council's made, and also condition 41, which the applicant has requested be changed slightly to allow them to explore other avenues there. And then further on in the report, there's a number of changes to four conditions which are set out there. And they're all fairly minor. I think one will be picked up around the piling with regards to the viaduct, and I expect obviously the applicant will explain what that issue actually is there. But that again, from our perspective, these have all been agreed with consultees, including the Environment Agency. We don't see a problem with those issues in relation to that. So I think from that point of view, that's it.
Thank you. Right, so we have speakers on this. Against, we have Mike Streetley. Would you like to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes when you start speaking, Mike, okay?
Thank you for this opportunity to speak about this proposal. As a scientist, I am used to presenting evidence in a calm and measured manner, but on this matter, I feel that the time for such an approach is gone. First, to the officers who are promoting this scheme and recommending approval. You're telling these councillors that a time saving of around 60 seconds driving on Smithfield Road in rush hour is more important than Shropshire Council's commitment to tackling climate change. What are you thinking of when you watch the news at night, when you see LA on fire, shops again shut in Shrewsbury through flooding, farmers unable to grow their crops, food prices spiralling? What are you thinking of when you suggest that councillors here today vote to make that worse? Is that your idea of planning balance? 60 seconds of driver's time is worth more than the chaos and catastrophe of climate change. How can you fall back on the paid-for legal advice that because 55,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas is small compared to the UK's emissions over 5 years, that it's okay? That's like saying all emissions are okay. Why decommission our coal power stations in that case? We know from recent court cases that the UK does not have the policies in place to meet its transport emission reduction targets, and WSP's own report says that neither does Shropshire. That is the metric that you should consider. When we're failing to meet the challenge, every extra tonne of carbon takes us further off track. If you're walking towards a cliff, every extra step could be your last. But that also means there's hope. Every tonne saved can move us away from the cliff edge, off the path to the worst disasters. And so to councillors Joyce Barrow, Jeff Elmer, Vince Hunt, Paul Wynne, Roy Aldcroft, you voted in favour of this scheme 15 months ago. You now know that from the auditors, how appallingly the project has been run and that the cost has more than doubled to at least 180 million, which is largely unfunded. You can see from this report that the carbon impact is disastrously worse and will by itself blow the council's commitment to net zero out of the water. Are you still happy to pick up this faulty recommendation and vote it through? What do you think about the choice between 60 seconds of commuter time and abandoning the council's net zero plans? So in summary, officers and councillors, this road was dreamt up in ancient history, i.e. before the pandemic and the era of global boiling, and that's where it should be dumped. Recommending and voting for this proposal will at a stroke derail Shropshire Council's commitment to tackling the climate emergency. You will know the many decisions that planning committees have made in the past that we now come to regret. Will your name be on the paper for future generations to see who has shackled them with this legacy?
Well timed. Thank you, Mike. Okay. We have a councillor now, Nick Barsley. Would you like to come forward, please? Right, Nick, you have 3 minutes. Okay, you're not local councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Nick Bardsley, local Shropshire councillor for the villages of Brighton and Basschurch and other small communities north of Shrewsbury. Rat run traffic has been a major issue for rural villages such as these, but also for other villages in the vicinity, Montford Bridge, Burma Heath, Fitz, where vehicles travelling between the A5 and the Harlescote Battlefield business parks and vice versa are using totally unsuitable rural roads to gain access. You can't blame the drivers. What other realistic option is there? The pollution caused by the rat run traffic is understandably not a major issue in this report, in fact, in any of the reports. But on average, 4,000 to 5,000 vehicles are using Brighton 11 towns and Basschurch and indeed the other villages, over 100 heavy goods vehicles every day. And as you would expect, the traffic flows are concentrated in the morning and evening peaks. There's an almost continuous stream of vehicles at these times, and air and noise pollution are a major issue. I think it's fair to say that the objectors don't even think that matters at all. The existing parish councils in these areas, Brighton 11 towns, Burma Heath, Montford Bridge, all support the project. They all suffer, as the two villages in my division suffer, from the environmental damage caused by heavy traffic. Noise, air pollution, the major issue in this report, and danger to local and road users, children getting to and from local schools, whether they be pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders. I haven't heard anyone this afternoon, there are others to come, I appreciate, who have an alternative to the North West Relief Road. The ones mentioned in the report, cycling and walking and other things mentioned, how does that cope with heavy goods vehicles, commercial traffic, trucks, vans, and so on? I have a great deal of respect for the views of many of those who oppose the road. I share on all sorts of issues, but I don't agree we can do without the road.
Nick, I'm afraid your time's up, Nick.
The road is needed more than ever now, and I urge members of the committee to support the report's recommendations and approve what the report suggests. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Nick. Right, we have the applicant, Matt Johnson. You'd like to come forward, please?
Sorry, Chair, it's actually going to be a representative.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes also. Okay?
Thank you, Chair. John Liggett, WSP. I'm a town planner representing Matt. So can I just check it's this button here I press?
It's on now.
It's on there.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you, Chair, members. Just some clarity, really, on some points that have been made, noting that they've been well represented by your officer's report regarding these conditions before you. The first one, just a simple point of order. Your officer's report, paras 662 to 665, the correct conditioned wordings are there, not in Appendix 1, so it's the main text ones that we would prefer you to go forward with, please. And then, as mentioned, some of the conditions before you have been subject to fairly logical change just to make robust. Things like removal of a tree that's now blown down, infiltration details that are actually agreed with the technical officers, and as per para 663 for condition 30,
Monitoring is still ongoing at the moment, so it's just a change in the wording to meaningfully submit the results of that monitoring once the relevant work stages has occurred. So they're all fairly simple. Condition 41, however, is a critical matter to understand, as we've heard. And for the avoidance of doubt, the information that's been shared recently with the LPA is to demonstrate how to accommodate that rather dynamic landscape of evolving guidance. It's not a submission for Condition 1, clearly because that doesn't exist until today. So we're not attempting to run before we walk in planning or greenhouse gas terms. So since that first resolution to approve, that evolving field of carbon assessment has moved on apace. In this instance, DFT financial calculations. And that guidance has altered the balance of modelled reductions and increases in user impacts, hence a change in the headline estimates. Nonetheless, those new calculations do not affect the conclusions of the EIA or the original resolution. A word of caution here. Basically, depending on how you select your information, headline figures derived without the benefit of Condition 41's work can be skewed up to, say, 8%, but that's without the real-world effects of Shropshire's current transport strategy, and so user emissions would more realistically be less than 1/10 of 1%. So therefore, it would be a very high bar to set the scheme's initial calculated impact in isolation against Shropshire's 2030 targets with no account for mitigation. And this scheme does not necessarily stop the council to meet its 2030 targets because of Condition 41 and the significant funding allocated to offset construction impact before 2030, as well as active shared transport improvements and, as we've heard, reducing Shrewsbury's town centre traffic. So essentially, raw early calculations are not the end story, and Condition 41 does not turn away from them, but demands up-to-date enforceable gate check, a condition using a hierarchical mechanism to prioritise the local measures, and only if then approved does the scheme go forward. So there's no free passes here. I hope you find those clarifications helpful. We have staff here if you have more detail required. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, before I open the floor, would Mike, you'd like to come back on anything?
I think people have, speakers have clarified what needs to be clarified. I don't think there's anything I need to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Anybody else would like to say anything? Anthony, you'd like to say a word?
If I might just speak on two matters which have been raised, just to assist members. Firstly, the point that's been raised about the council's resolution and stated position on its 2030 targets, and secondly, the basis upon which the condition is imposed. So, turning firstly to the council, I mean the full council there, rather than the planning committee here acting as the local planning authority, and the declaration of the climate emergency and its desire to achieve net zero by 2030. In officers' view, and I agree with them, there's no real doubt that that is a material consideration for you to take into account, i.e., you don't close your eyes to that. But equally, the weight that you give that in your decision-making process, as the decision makers, is entirely a matter for you. Of course, approval today or a continuation of the resolution to approve with amended conditions doesn't ultimately result in the relief road being constructed. That is not your decision today. You are deciding whether or not to grant planning permission. It is a necessary step toward the project moving forward, but of course the project as a whole will be considered by the council as full council in terms of the business case and whether to proceed or not. So the grant of planning permission being a necessary precursor to that to provide some certainty. Secondly then, the revisions to Condition 41 itself. Of course, a condition is required to meet the necessary 6 tests, necessary, reasonable, related to planning, etc. The purpose of the condition in the present case is obviously to ensure that the applicant's commitment to achieve net zero, albeit across a changed time frame to the previous time it was presented to the planning committee, is secured. And there is no doubt that it does that, because the council as local planning authority, through Condition 41,
retain complete control over the mitigation of the greenhouse gas emissions from the project, because it requires a plan to be submitted. If you read, as I'm sure you have done, in detail the wording of condition 41, it doesn't just stop there. It sets out what's going to be in the plan, including a hierarchy of approach, time frame, etc., etc. So ultimately, officers will continue to control the process of securing the mitigation and ensuring that ultimately the project does end up neutral through off-site mitigation. I said there was going to be 2 points. There is just a third point. There was a characterisation of paid-for legal advice, which I don't believe was directed at me. I think it was directed at the committee report. And I'd just say, I think that's perhaps a little unfair criticism of Mr. Davies, who's prepared the report, because actually what he's referring to there are judgments in the High Court. So decisions of judges. They are not merely opinions of people who were retained by the applicant. They are decisions of High Court judges. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, I open up the floor. Boom, here we go. I think Andy was first.
Okay. This is the first time in the decade I've been on planning committees that we're seeing a proposal that...
Pull the mic towards you a bit, please, Andy.
Sorry. I'll start again. This is the first time since I've been on planning committees that we've seen a planning application that actually disregards council policy. That is a significant consideration. It doesn't tweak it. I think both committees have been quite good at sort of bending policies a bit and getting around them where they need to make something happen. But this is completely in conflict with council policy. That, I think, is a major decision for this planning committee. I don't believe, with apologies to Mike, I don't believe this thing about, oh, it's not much in the scale of the world. Everything is much in the scale of the world. That it all adds up. There's no one thing that is causing global warming. It's loads of things that are causing global warming. And I've been in Malibu when the fires were approached and I've fled. Nothing like as bad as has been this time round. And you can see it all over the world, and including in this country, that the climate is changing. And every action we take needs to do our bit. That was the point of the climate emergency that we declared in May 2019. I think this proposal is unacceptable because it breaches council policy. If we're going to breach council policy, we should go back to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Julia? Is your mic on, Julia?
I talk very loudly, so... So yes, this is my alternative proposal to the officer recommendation, that the council declared an climate emergency in May 2019 with the aim of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. And there are various paragraphs within this that say that we cannot achieve this, and it's been said here. Of course, it's really important. There are approximately, if you look at every 4,400 tonnes of carbon released, that equates to one future human death. And like we were saying, you know, this is one project, but little bit of carbon here, little bit of carbon there, all adds up. We shouldn't be putting more carbon into the atmosphere at all. We've already exceeded the 1.5 degree temperature warning, and that only had 50% chance of us reversing climate change. We're a farming community as a whole in Shropshire, I know farmers who can't get their crops out of the fields because of the wet weathers. It's a change in climate. There are fields in Herefordshire that have not been out of water for years. This should be a full council decision because we are breaching this. Council policies are a material planning consideration and the guide to the council and its work. If the officer recommendation is approved, this committee will be breaching a council policy, and for this reason alone it should be full council. Within the national planning framework, we talk about sustainability, and sustainability means that we do not damage future generations, which this will if we're going into the plus side of the carbon. We've got no plan really that says exactly how we're going to mitigate. If we had a plan to mitigate, we could at least have a look at it and decide whether that's viable, and we don't. It also states that this plan might not be there until 2030. So when is the road going to start? If the road's going to need this plan of mitigation in place before we start, are we starting before the mitigation? We've also got the traffic assessments were done in 2017 and they're out of date. This is pre-COVID. There are differences now in the way that we move. So the proposal is the committee requests full council to consider this planning application and make a decision which gives particular regard to its May 2019 commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030. And secondly, that traffic modelling is updated prior to the council consideration of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That's a proposal.
I would second that.
Sorry?
I would second that.
And he'll second it, okay?
Thank you. I'm largely echoing the two previous speakers, I'm afraid. In all types of planning applications of all sizes, all natures, it's not unknown for a variation application to come back to amend a condition of a consent already granted. And very often these are minor, having little impact on the proposed development. However, the one before us today, in its wish to revise condition 41 particularly of the planning consent, is not in this league. The implications of such a revision are huge, far-reaching and very, very long-lasting. In adopting in 2019 the net zero target for 2030, it was widely felt that Shropshire Council was doing the right thing and would be on the right side of history, and it was very much welcomed. However, a mere 5 years later, this committee is being asked, because of now having updated and more accurate figures for the emissions from this road scheme, to abandon that commitment in favour of a 2050 end date. This is surely back to front. A single planning application to the Northern Planning Committee should not be able to change council policy in order to attempt to gain acceptance. Council policy is exactly that. It should be determined by council in a democratic manner by the full council membership. The changes to the projected carbon emissions and the extended time period to become carbon neutral have elicited many responses to the consultation, very many of which make very, very valid cases for deep concern over these proposals, and the responses of which are given give clear and valid challenge to the increased emissions and the rationale with which I'm in agreement. Climate change is very real and with us today. We have seen wildfires in California, catastrophic flooding in Europe and also locally. We will be abdicating our responsibility for current and future residents of the town and wider area were we to allow this application to continue, and I urge members to vote against this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Vince.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, I'm listening to the debate, but I'm also mindful of the fact that whilst there's a request for it to go back to full council on what is essentially a planning application, albeit for the change of a small part to delegate to people who understand everything in the offices, with the officers. I just remind what council said at the beginning, that actually the full business case will go back to council. This is not going to happen until it has been approved by council. And I think just kicking the can down the street and wanting to go back for every little thing is I don't think, to be honest with you, it's helpful. this is not going to happen until the full business case has been before full council. And it's at that point that you will get your chance to say everything that you want to say. And I'm sure council will correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's entirely correct. I mean, I'm sure there is no misunderstanding, but the alteration is the time frame. The project is net zero. Proceeding on the basis that's per the applicant's submissions and the condition that precludes any development commencing until a plan and strategy has been submitted identifying all of the different relevant parts of that for the approval of the council, and then the development is required to proceed in accordance with that. So just like any other planning application where somebody says, well, what materials is it going to be built of? It might not look very nice. I realise that's a slightly trite example, and I'm just making it straightforward. You know, it's perfectly ordinary and commonplace to impose conditions which require the approval of further details. Now, condition 41 requires that the entire strategy for the mitigation is approved by the council before a spade can go in the ground. This isn't a case of, oh, well, some of the project can proceed and we'll kick the can down the road. It all needs to be detailed out. But of course, also, the grant of planning permission is just one part of the process of approval. And just like with any other planning application, it's not reasonable, nor is it even really possible in many cases, particularly for outline planning applications, to require an applicant to detail out every single aspect of a proposal until such time as they've at least got the certainty of a grant of permission subject to those details. So ultimately, I go back to my original point, that the council retain control over the mitigation strategy and will obviously take whatever relevant advice they need to take to discharge their duty. But that's no different to any other planning application. Just turning to the point that was made about, you know, the balance between the time frame and the council's resolution. I appreciate, of course, there is a tension there, but the key thing to bear in mind is that the project is net zero. This isn't a proposal for whatever it might well be.
Chairman, on a point of order, is this legal advice or planning advice that we're being given?
This is legal advice because it's a point that was just raised. So the point was raised that it isn't compatible with the council's resolution on the climate emergency, wasn't it? Because the original time frame was 2030 and the proposal is to 2050. And we're agreed that that's a material consideration to be taken into account. But the points that are then made about, you know, future impacts, etc., that doesn't tie with the point that it is net zero. Because if it were the case, if that logic were to be applied to every planning application before you isn't net zero, very few of them are. If you apply that logic, the legal point is one needs to make decisions consistency. There has to be consistency in decision making. You have to apply that logic to all relevant planning applications. We don't have another planning application today, as I understand it, but if there were an application for 4 houses, applying that logic, you would also have to have refuse that or refer it to the full cabinet, because that is not compatible with the council's net zero policy of 2030, because that development is not net zero.
Chair,
Thank you for that.
if I may come back on that.
Sorry, Andy. Roger's speaking next, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand it's a condition of Department of Transport that this information is provided. Nobody says that you need that information if you want to build a house. Department of Transport need it. And I would not say that planning permission is part of it. You need planning permission to do it. It's the bedrock of what, if you haven't got planning permission, you shouldn't build it. I already understand that construction has started, even though it says in there that detailed construction should be the planning permission, etc., and all complied with all the regulations before construction starts. My understanding is it's already constructed. I have every sympathy with the councillor who spoke. I was clerk to Wrighton 11 Parish Council for a number of years ago. But there are other ways to stop that rabbit run than building a £130 million road, which contravenes council policy. Many different ways to stop it being used as a rabbit run, many different ways to stop the HGVs transporting through that and using it as a through route. Council is a highways authority, and if they wanted to, council could take action to actually stop it. It is a material consideration. I've listened to the arguments, I've read the papers, and sorry, council made a decision, unanimous decision, about carbon and making it a climate emergency. We operate, this committee operates as under delegated authority given us by council. Council agreed the Constitution, and the Constitution gives us the power to make the decision. We operate under the delegated authority of the council. If we say that we're going to go against council policy, surely it should go back to council, because we're going against totally against the policy that they set. I have heard nothing today which has persuaded me as a reason for going against that policy. It is something that we all take recognizance of where this world is going. We all have a responsibility, and for 10 members, 9 members to make that decision when there's 74 councillors sit around the table and make a decision, it should go back to council for it. So I fully support what is being proposed. It should go back there because it is a fundamental decision, the planning permission and acceptance that we are going against the climate emergency, and it'll take till 2050 before it goes. Totally against it. So unless I can really be persuaded that it is, and it's a necessity that we go against it, and it is not a necessity that we go against it. As I say, I understand the rabbit run, and I sympathise. I have roads of a similar size to the ones which go through Wrighton 11 Thames, and they can be overburdened by the traffic using it as a short cut. There are highway considerations that can be taken and put into operation. So I would fully support again and again and again the reference back to council.
Thank you. Christian, you'd like to come back on that, or just try?
Not in terms of legal advice, no. Whether Mike wants to come back, that's a different point.
Mike, would you like to come back at any point?
But really, I think Christian summed up. I think from our perspective, there's the business case which will go back to full council anyway. This is a planning application, and I think referencing planning applications back to full council, you know, that could happen quite on a regular basis if we took that view. The full council delegate authority to the planning committee to make that decision. So I think the issue really is for you to decide whether if you've got concerns, then obviously you will vote against it because of the climate change emergency, and also if you're not happy with the change to policy, it needs to be properly done here.
Thank you, Mike. Andy, you wanted to speak.
Thank you. With respect, the legal advice, I think, misinterprets what's happening. This is not a housing development. So, you know, it's not, this is a road planned and built and properly financed by Shropshire Council. And it's on our carbon budget. A housing development is on the developer's carbon budget. And that is a fundamental difference. It's down to us to control our carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the important thing, we've heard about a possible reference of this back to full council, but it's quite important to be clear that we're in a quite unique, well not unique, but an unusual position in that the council is determining its own planning application, and that it is very important that there is a separation between those making the determination about planning and then the wider determinations from the highways point of view about whether or not the road is ultimately built. So that would get quite difficult in terms of putting a planning application for the council to determine its own planning application in full council, because you've lost that separation that you have by it being determined by this planning committee. So I think that's something to bear in mind with regard to the proposition which has been put forward. And to reiterate that what the planning authority is looking at here is whether to grant a planning permission, not whether this road should be built. That is not what is before you today. You are not deciding to build this road. That is not the remit of this committee here. So you need to, yes, that's a material planning consideration. You've heard that, and then there's weight to be given to it. But the climate emergency, while a policy of the council, isn't in fact an adopted planning policy per se. It's a wider policy of the council, and that's relevant to whether ultimately it goes on to decide to build this road. So I think it's really important to keep your mind, councillors, on the planning issues to do with this within the context of your consideration.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you for that. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I hear the advice that's given there, but I'm also aware that Shropshire Council is considering giving delegated authority for certain planning decisions to parish and town councils. Parish and town councils, some do have parish councils. Advertising, for example, a consultation has gone around parish councils. Did they wish to take it on or not? Some parish councils have planning committees, others do not. Even on a parish council with a planning committee, they sometimes refer it back to their full council. I know they're not the final decision maker because it's Shropshire Council, but they do it. But if Shropshire Council is wanting to delegate some of the planning decisions back to parish and town councils because of the workload there is on staff and everything like that, doesn't that go against what was just said?
Bit lost there, but
Through you, Chair, that's a separate debate about and the mechanisms of delegating those sorts of decisions. But what we're talking about is a body, Shropshire Council, determining its own planning decision. Now, town and parish councils, when they have subcommittees to look at planning things and their full council, they are making comments on planning applications. They're not determining them, and they're also not commenting on their own planning applications. They're not submitting planning applications and then commenting on them. So I think it's not really a direct analogy there, I think, in terms of what we're talking about here today.
thank you, Miranda. Go on, Roger.
It isn't the councillors who's putting in the planning permission, it's Shropshire Council, and there are two distinct differences, because Shropshire Council officers can put forward all sorts of things to council, and it's the councillors who can do it or not and make them change it.
As in Shropshire councillors?
Shropshire Council.
Yes, yeah. Julia.
I've lost completely what I was going to say.
Right,
yeah. The carbon mitigation. Carbon mitigation. Prevention is better than cure. Once we release carbon, it's released. Getting it back, there's all sorts of, I mean, I'm not a scientist, I can't tell you, but I do know from reading that it is very, very difficult. And, how much does a tree absorb? Well, it depends on the tree, it depends on how old the tree is, it depends on the weather, it depends on so many things. And we can plant 100 trees. We've got 2 storms coming, and if anybody's gone to Vernwy recently, you'll know what a storm can do to trees. You know, all these things we need to prevent, not cure, because that is so much more difficult. And we haven't got a plan. There is no plan of mitigation in front of us. So how can we vote on this when we don't know exactly what we're voting for in terms of mitigation? Thank you.
In the same breath there, the government at the moment is asking us to build another 1,000 houses a year in Shropshire. Just one point. Vince?
Actually, that's 2,000 houses.
Altogether.
Yeah. I'm not unsympathetic to what's being said, but this is a material it was a material consideration when we made the decision, which was to grant, and I know that there was quite a lot of politics involved, with some groups coming out and being against it before they'd even heard the evidence for it. I think we need to move past that bit, to be perfectly honest with you. I can only say that I would not agree with decisions that should be made by this planning committee or any other planning committee being brought to full council. There are mechanisms that allow for that. You can bring a motion to full council, which you do on a regular basis, and there are other tools. But I can only say again that the final decision on whether this road goes ahead will be when it comes as the business case to full council. It's not, I don't think, for us to decide today whether it should happen or shouldn't happen, because that decision has already been made. But this is about giving officers the delegation to put together the plan that we've spoken about a lot as to the carbon mitigation. I would hope that that mitigation can be done locally, so that it's about the Shropshire pound, but actually you could take it further and further out, and you probably could mitigate it a lot quicker by working with other schemes. But I'd rather see that money staying in Shropshire, frankly. I would also say that you know, as other members have discussed the wider Northwest Relief Road, I do note with interest that Arriva buses, that the hospitals, that the Shrewsbury bid, that the West Mercia Police Force, and that the hospital group have all come out in support of this scheme. But we're not talking about the wider scheme. We're talking about giving authority to officers to put together the plan of mitigation for the carbon. It can be mitigated, and I agree. It should be that we mitigate it sooner rather than later. And we can challenge officers to do that. That's our job as councillors, is to challenge them to do that. But we're not here to discuss the wider relief road. We're here really to give that delegated authority to the Planning and Development Services Manager to put together that mitigation and move forward. Doesn't mean to say the scheme won't go to full council. It will during the business case. I think, to be honest with you, we're making more of this than we should be, to be honest. That's all I can say. We're not here to talk about whether the road goes ahead or not. We're here to make a delegation to officers to get the amelioration put in place for carbon.
Thank you, Vince. Jeff.
Thank you. Can I just explain, I don't see why I have to, but I feel I should, why I voted for this scheme last time. Why I voted for this scheme was, one, because my residents are asking for it, 2, 4, 5 days a week stuck in traffic, coming down the hill across the riverfront, 20 minutes wasted sitting in fumes under the railway bridge. And I don't think that's fair for people. I certainly don't like it. I couldn't open the window, you start coughing, whatever. So I think it's far better to remove that carbon from that small area and possibly disperse it somewhere else or elsewhere. So it's not just a saving for motorists going faster down a dual carriageway, it's a saving of 20 odd minutes of 50, 60 cars for an hour, hour and a half every morning and every evening, just moving a few feet, sitting there and pumping out more and more and more and more contamination. So that's why I voted for it, and I can't see a reason not to vote that way again, because until that problem is solved, we're always going to have cars and queues of traffic, gridlock in the town centre just to get through it, and that is not fair on anybody, especially the residents, the shopkeepers, the shoppers, everybody travelling through Shrewsbury. One is a waste of time, two, they're getting gas sitting in their vehicles, three, it's causing gridlock. And when you look at government policy, that we're now going towards more electric cars, that may reduce that amount of fumes in the future. I don't know, but let's see what happens. But I'd like to ask officers if there is actually an advantage that they've actually calculated on carbon by removing the carbon going through that traffic jam and under that bridge. I mean, there must be a calculation surely to say how much carbon that causes. Is there any way we can justify that amount of that 2 miles of concentrated carbon?
Thank you, Mike. Hopefully.
I think that's something really that needs to be directed to the applicant, because they're the people who have been working on this scheme for a long, long time. I don't know whether you want to invite them back in to answer that.
Well, is it something we could find out?
We could ask the question. Have you got any answer to that, the applicant? Is there any sort of knowledge about what the question was asked?
Absolutely, Chair. Just on a point of clarification, there's a technical difference between the air pollution matters in carbon and the same. So there is a carbon cost to having traffic in the centre actually.
Listen.
Business case, which is previously today.
If people can hear me. First of all, on a point of clarification, there's a lot of terminology. I'm not a subject expert. I'm the project manager and have these guys assisting on such matters. But I do understand that there is a difference between air pollution and carbon, per se. So there is undoubtedly a carbon impact in any activity on the roads in the town. That's absolutely correct. But the commensurate impact of that is normally seen in air pollution and a reduction in air quality. And as you say, that can affect people's personal behaviour and personal health. It's an appreciable impact on longevity in Britain. So in terms of the carbon management for the project, there is, as we've said and as the recommendation in the report suggests, there is an impact in the construction of the road. Condition 41 is the mechanism by which we see the local planning authority, thereby the council, managing that. It's effectively a boilerplating exercise. As we've heard from other speakers, this project does not proceed to the ground until we have satisfied the requirements set out in condition 41. As applicant, we support that approach, and as a responsible developer, to pick up on the point made about the Shropshire Pound, I think in the creation of that submission for the local planning authority around discharge of our obligations under the condition, definitely a local first approach, something that we'd look to engender the Shropshire economy with initially, and then we can obviously look on a wider hierarchical basis to discharge that. Is that sufficient information to answer the point made?
Thank you for that. This is unusual, but I think it was a valid point, and I let you speak. Okay, so you've covered it. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Sorry? Sorry, I can't hear. No, sorry, no. There's a question there. I'm happy for that. No, I'm not going to let you speak. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Julia.
And just to make the point about traffic, we're not investing in active travel in the way that we should. And it's, you know, the traffic is the number of cars on the road, which is increasing year on year and year. People doing short journeys. We can stop that. We have the ability to stop that. And we're not even looking at that. So being car-centric constantly, and yes, I know what it's like to live outside the town, and you need a car. I realise that, but I'd have loved to have cycled in where I used to live, but it was too dangerous, too many cars on the road. We're looking in the wrong direction. How long will it be before this section of road is traffic jammed? Because I remember before we had the bypass, and we used to, you know, that period of time when the bypass was made and the Roman road was no longer congested. Look at it now. You know, we're just getting more and more and more vehicles on the road, whether it's freight, whether it's people travelling. We're looking in the wrong direction. But that's just a point I wanted to make. The other one was on the other, do we have any correspondence with that we can look at, any reports from the Environment Agency? Thank you.
In relation to what, sorry?
The water framework decision.
The Environment Agency, as I understand it, are happy with the change in that. It was to do with it basically because the monitoring's been ongoing. It's still ongoing, but it needs to be tied in now to the pilot. Because the pilot will be the first thing to be done, and then when that's all together, that will be all sent to the water as part of the Water Framework Directive to be sent to the Environment Agency to be agreed.
Vince? Thank you. It's interesting, actually, that Councillor Evans talking about the North West Relief Road being gridlocked. I would suggest that if it doesn't get built, the centre of Shrewsbury would come to a complete standstill. I know, well, for the whole day. I know Roger also suggests perhaps, you know, taking traffic and lorries out of Wright and 11 towns presumably means taking them through the middle of Shrewsbury, because that would be the only way if you took them off the rural roads that they're using as rat runs at the moment. I'm sure the people of Shrewsbury would be very happy to hear that as a suggestion. However, we're not talking about all of that. What we're talking about is giving delegated authority to people who are experts in their field within the council to make the decisions or to work out how we, and if we can, mitigate the carbon that this project will produce. And I think, to be honest, we could sit here for the whole night discussing whether the road should be built or whether the road shouldn't be built. That decision has already been made. That decision will then be ratified at full council when the business case goes before it. So you've had a proposal and you've had a seconder. I'm also now going to propose, once that vote's taken, that we go with the recommendation to delegate authority to the Planning and Development Services Manager to grant planning permission. I'm not entirely sure about those words, but there you go. Roger, please, I didn't interrupt you, Roger. Don't be so rude. Thank you. That we go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair. Roy.
Yeah, I mean, I travel regularly on the A53. Accessing the RSH and the main tourist routes. And that always involved travelling through Shrewsbury. It's not a 60-second delay. It can be half an hour, it can be longer. You can be stuck under that railway bridge that we've talked about, amongst all that carbon, pollution, vibration, you name it. Not only that, but I do believe that this Northwest Relief Road is going to do a lot of good for Shrewsbury as a town. It's going to prevent the damage to the buildings. It's going to take off a lot of those things that we've been talking about, like the balance in carbon emissions and that type of thing. You're going to reduce it in town, and you'll probably reduce it by the time this thing's built, actually on the ring road. So we're talking about a hypothetical thing, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor Vince Hunt on delegating authority to the Planning and Development Services Manager to grant permission for this to go ahead. Basically, and on the second point, active travel, I'll have you know, we have within the Highways Department and various others quite an active team of officers and councillors working on projects throughout the county. So I object to the fact that it's not being, or nothing's being done with it, because it is. And it's actually having an effect already. So active travel is there, it is being developed, there's two officers on it, and as I say, I support the officer's recommendation.
Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, there can only be one proposal on the table at a time, and I'm amazed that there are now two proposals.
No, he didn't put it
because
through.
the second
He said
proposal assumes the first one is going to be rejected.
he didn't say that.
He
didn't say
but whatever. However, what I was going to say is the main problem with Shrewsbury is the A5 and the island around the Dobies roundabout there. That is the main problem with Shrewsbury. The traffic won't use that, especially at the peak times, because it is snowed up. 10 minutes, half an hour, can even be 40 minutes at time just to do that short section of road. That needs doing urgently. Northwest Relief Road is not going to help that at all. I live near there, I have to use it, and at certain times of the day, I use the side roads because I know it will be snowed up. That is the problem with Shrewsbury, not the centre of Shrewsbury, not going up the battlefield. There is a ring road around Shrewsbury now, and that is it, and that's why, and it was mentioned by Councillor Evans earlier on about getting an updated traffic survey. It is now how old? We should be having that now, and we haven't. We're using old data, out of date data. The A5 has gotten busier and busier and busier. You can't use it at certain times of the day. The traffic is up half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, even a mile length. You listen to the broadcasts in the morning to see what it is like. So, yeah, we do need to go to the vote, but there is a motion on the table, amendment to it, and that should be taken first, surely, before anything else is put.
I agree with that. Nothing's been proposed yet. Pam?
Thank you. Just two additional points, if I may. One is partly in relation to Roy Allcroft's comments about it being better for Shrewsbury. I'd just like to remind everyone that Shrewsbury Town Council voted, and I think it was unanimously against the road. So that's the view of Shrewsbury. And the other point that hasn't been made is this road will obviously open up opportunities for development, which will provide an increased number of vehicles on this road, so it starts to cancel itself out after it's not been there terribly long.
Thank you. Right, I think we've got 18 speakers or 18 times somebody's spoken. So I think we've exhausted it, to be honest. We're going around in circles a bit here. We have a proposal on the table, one proposal on the table at the moment, and it's been seconded by Andy, proposed by Roger. I think we should move.
Here's the proposed budget.
Proposed budget, sorry, I apologise. Seconded by Andy, I apologise, that's you. Yeah, so I think we can go to the vote now, unless any officers have got anything to say. Anybody? No.
Okay, so the proposal from Councillor Julia Evans that has been seconded is that this should be actually passed to full council to decide. I think, and Julia Evans sort of set out her proposal in detail. So I will ask you each if you, you want further updated traffic modelling before that. Yes, thank you. So I will ask each member if they are for or against that. Okay. Councillor Oldcroft?
Against.
Councillor Boddington? Councillor Barrow? Councillor Elner? Councillor Julia Evans? Councillor Roger Evans?
For.
Councillor Hunt?
Against.
Councillor Mosley?
For.
Councillor Wynne?
Against.
Chair, that is 5 against and 4 in favour, so that has fallen.
Thank you. Vince?
Chair, I would like to recommend that we go with the recommendation, which is to delegate authority to the Planning and Development Services Manager, as per what it says. I will read it out if people want me to read it out, but that is to make adjustments to 6, 30, 44 and 58 and principally 41 conditions.
Thank you. Michelle?
Apologies, Chair, not great timing. The recommendation, just in terms of housekeeping, doesn't really give us the any flexibility at all to change even single words of conditions. So we just need to amend that slightly to give us the flexibility to make any non-material amendments. So it wouldn't make a difference to the operation of the condition. It would just be wording and bits of things that come across. So it wouldn't be material change. Just on a point of housekeeping. Thank you.
Are you happy to be on board, Vince?
If they're non-material, then yes. If they turn out to be material, I would want it to come back to the committee.
Okay. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Roy.
With the same condition.
With the amendment?
With the same condition.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Chair. I think everybody's heard that proposal and that's been adequately explained, so I will now ask if you are for or against. Councillor Oldcroft.
For.
Councillor Boddington.
Against.
Councillor Barrow. For. Councillor Elner.
For.
Councillor Julia Evans.
Against.
Councillor Roger Evans.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor Mosley.
Against.
Councillor Wynne.
For.
That is 5 in favour and 4 against, Chair, so that has been carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's gone through. We move to item 9, appeals and appeal decisions. Anybody got any comments on? Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you. The comment I'd like to make is well done to the team that have looked at these, because we've won every single one, unless I'm mistaken, of the appeals. So I think that's a good race. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Joyce. Any other comments on appeals? No? Okay. So, date of the next meeting. To be noted, the next meeting of the North Planning Committee will be held on the 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of February, in the Shrewsbury room, Shirehall. Possibly not, but we'll have to update you on that close to the time. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, everybody.